Today is going to be a question and answer session. I've already received quite a few questions by email. But I don't want the whole session to be taken up by answering just the questions I've already received. So I'll answer as many as I can in the first half hour or so, and then open it for others to ask questions. I'll answer the questions I received in the order in which I received them. So the first question was asked by Yossi. Yossi, would you like to ask the question yourself, or shall I read out what you wrote?
Hello, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, well, you can basically ask the question what I wrote. It's anyway the same question. So yes, please, thank you.
So what Yossi wrote is, why has Arunachala been attracting people towards itself like a magnet for hundreds of years and still does? What is the power of Arunachala? I'm asking this mainly from a physical point of view. Of course, there is the spiritual aspect also, which Michael has mentioned on many occasions. That is what Yossi asked, but in answer to that, we can't really separate the physical from the spiritual in the case of Arunachala. Though Arunachala appears physical to our eyes, it is actually spiritual. So it's the attraction of the physical form of Arunachala is because of its spiritual power. So the two cannot really be separated. Part of the answer is in your first question, Yossi. You say, why has Arunachala been attracting people towards itself like a magnet? Bhagavan has often said this is the magnetic hill. It does attract people. The nature of this hill is that it's such that it does attract spiritual aspirants, particularly those whose sole aim is the annihilation of ego. In other words, to surrender themselves entirely. So such is the nature of the hill. Because the hill is a physical embodiment of our real nature, it naturally attracts us to the extent to which we truly wish to surrender ourselves and eradicate our ego. To explain this is, it's certainly beyond my ability to explain it. Bhagavan himself said in the first line of the first verse of Arunachala Ashtakam, Ari Varu Giriyana Bamataru Mamma Adisayan Idin Sayal Ari Vari Darkom. That means it sits calmly. Ari Varu literally means bereft of awareness. But obviously, Bhagavan doesn't mean that it is actually bereft of awareness, as if it were bereft of awareness, is the implication. But its action is adisayam. Adisayam means it's preeminent, or it's wonderful, it's extraordinary, it's beyond, it's adisaya. It's very difficult to translate in English exactly what adisaya means. It's wonderful. Ariadu Arkum means it is rare or difficult for anyone to understand. So basically what Bhagavan is saying is, though it seems to be an insentient hill, a hill bereft of awareness, it has a wonderful action. Even its action is not an action of doing, though sail literally means doing. Just like a magnet attracts without actually doing anything. Arunachala attracts us to itself without actually doing anything. And not only it attracts us, it brings about inward changes without actually doing anything itself. As Bhagavan said in the 14th or 15th 15th paragraph of Nana, he uses the analogy of the sun, which rises without any Icha Sangalpa or Yatna. That means without any desire, intention, or effort, but in its mere presence, everything happens on earth. Just like that, God doesn't actually do anything, but by the mere presence of God, all things happen. So such is the nature of Arunachala. What Arunachala actually does, how it works, is revealed by Bhagavan most clearly in verse 10 of Arunachala Patikam. What he says there, in the first sentence, he says, Partanam Pudumai. I've seen, Pudumai literally means a newness, something that is new, something that is fresh. But in this context, it means something that is wonderful. We're Valikanta Parvatam, this magnetic hill that forcibly attracts the soul. Or idane orudarum ortidum wearing sheste oruki. The soul, subduing the mischievous activity, that implies the mischievous mental activity of the soul who has thought of it even once. Oru tanadu abhimukamaha etu, pulling it or drawing it, attracting it to face towards itself. Itself here can either mean the soul faces towards itself or towards Arunachala, but since Arunachala is our own real self, it amounts to the same thing. Arunachala is the reality, the substance behind that is seemingly obscured by our rising as ego, but actually Arunachala is what we actually are. So so what Bhagavan implies here is by saying pulling that soul to face towards itself, he implies that it draws our attention within. First, it subdues the outward going activity of the mind, then it draws our attention within. It draws us to face towards itself. Itself, the one or peerless, the peerless one, that implies the infinite self-awareness that shines in the heart as I. That's the implication. And thereby making it Achala, like itself, it accepts that sweet soul as Bali. Bali means food that's offered in sacrifice. So in other words, the implication is that Arunachala will accept us and consume us as a sacrificial offering. So this is how Arunachala works. Though outwardly, as he said in the first line of verse 8 of Arunachala Ashtakam, though outwardly Arunachala seems to be an insentient hill, what actually it's doing, it's a magnetic hill that forcibly attracts us, and it subdues the outward going activity of our mind when we think of it even once. So even if we don't physically go to Arunachala, it's not necessary to be physically in the presence of Arunachala, because Arunachala is more than just the physical form. It is the physical form, but it's also much more than that. So even mere thought of Arunachala is sufficient. If we think of it even once, it will begin to do its work. It will subdue the outward going activity of our mind. It will draw our mind within to face itself, and thereby it will make us motionless like itself, and then it will consume us as a sacrificial offering. And then he ends the verse saying, "What a wonder this is! O souls, be saved by thinking of this great Aruna hill, the killer of the soul who shines in the heart as I." So For Bhagavan, salvation is nothing but the annihilation of ego. That's why he says, be saved by thinking of this great arrow in the hill, this killer of the soul, who shines in the heart as I. You see, I'm not, that's my answer. I mean, this is not a complete answer to your question, but I think this is the best answer I can give. Well, it's not an answer I'm giving, it's an answer that Bhagavan has given. Beyond that, why Arunachala is manifest in the physical form, why that physical form attracts us, this cannot be understood by, to put it metaphorically, it's something that we have to understand with heart rather than with head. We can't give any intellectual answer, but any answer that will satisfy the intellect. But if we've been attracted to Arunachala, we don't need any intellectual answer. We will just feel the attraction and we'll be satisfied with that, with the love that Arunachala has planted in our heart. Love alone is the answer. Bhagavan says elsewhere, or in a number of places, Bhagavan refers to Arunachala as Amburu Varunachala. Arunachala, the very form of love. So if we want to understand Arunachala, we have to surrender ourselves to its love. And only by being consumed by its love will we truly understand it. This what I've just read was the 10th verse of Arunachala Patikam. And after that comes the 11th verse, which I think has a relevance to the next question I was asked. The next question I was asked by someone who didn't want to be identified. What this person wrote was, I have a gnawing existential question about suicide, which is a bit taboo, and I don't feel comfortable raising it in a group setting. But the answer may be useful to many people, especially now when people are suffering through illness, grief, or simple anxiety. If you want to answer it publicly, I will be grateful, please, that you keep my identity anonymous. I have never received an answer which really satisfies the following question for me. Sadhu friends have told me, A, to commit suicide is simply a sin. Thou shalt not kill oneself or others. B, life is an opportunity to exhaust karma. C, life is an opportunity to realize oneself. Those are the answers that didn't satisfy this person. So what they have asked is, why should someone not commit suicide, especially if the I who I take myself to be is a formless phantom and I'm living in a painful dream? People are generally under the impression that physical death brings peace. That is why people say rest in peace. Too many people commit suicide thinking they will finally have relief from suffering once they die. I'm still reading the question. In the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that at the time of death, the self takes the mind with it, like the wind that takes with it the scent of a flower. If at the time of physical death, the delusionary identification with ego has not resolved, then my understanding is that, in fact, the unfulfilled desires springing from the ego will repeat this experience of identifying with the body, and the suffering and burden of identification with ego continues. Therefore, there is no peace while an ego arises and subsides, and one identifies with it. Therefore, physical death does not bring peace at all. Please, could you clarify my understanding? Well, I'll say this, addressing the person who asked this question. What you've asked in this, what you wrote in the last few sentences of your question is actually the answer. Killing the body is not a solution at all, because that just brings one dream to an end. But so long as ego survives with all its desires, it will continue dreaming one dream after another. And what we now take to be a life is actually just a dream. Our whole life, from birth to death, is just one long extended dream. And when one dream comes to an end, so long as the dreamer remains, the dreamer is ego, so long as ego survives, it will go on dreaming one dream after another. This is what is called reincarnation or rebirth or whatever. According to Bhagavan, it's all just one dream after another. These dreams continue so long as the dreamer remains. The dreamer is not this body, the dreamer is ego. The body is a part of the dream. So killing the body is not a solution. Sometimes Bhagavan used to say, punishing the body is like if a person has done some wrong, instead of beating the person, you beat the chair they're sitting on. The culprit is not the body. The body is innocent. It's ego which is the problem. So we have the one who deserves to die is not the body, but ego. So we have to commit suicide, but real suicide, not just mere death of the body, but death of ego. Ego-cide is our aim. You started this question saying this subject is a bit of a taboo, but I don't think it's a taboo for Bhagavan, because Bhagavan understands very well the anguish that leads people to commit suicide. And he refers to that anguish in the final verse of Arunachala Patikam. That's just in answer to Yussi, I had read verse 10 of Arunachala Patikam. The next verse, verse 11, is the final verse, which comes immediately before the first verse of Arunachala Ashtakam, which I've also read. What Bhagavan says in this verse 11 is, Giriyadu Parama Karudiya Embol Ketava Etene Kollo. That means, like me who think this hill to be the supreme, how many are those who had thereby been destroyed? Or no, thereby isn't there, thereby is implied. So the implication of this sentence is, if we take this hill, Arunachala, to be the supreme, to be God or whatever, Brahman or whatever we choose to call it, we take this to be God in the form of a hill, and take it as our God, our Guru, everything, it will surely destroy us. That is what Arunachala, the vow taken by Arunachala, as Bhagavan said in one of the verses of Aksharam, the vow taken by Arunachala is to kill those who come to it for refuge. So how can we survive if we take refuge in Arunachala? Our death is guaranteed. Death means the death of ego. So that's the first sentence. In the second sentence, what Bhagavan says is, O people who are wandering about, thinking of a means to give up the body, having given up desire for this defective life due to its expanding or unfolding misery, there is on earth one rare medicine that when thought of once within the mind will kill without killing. Kill without killing means it will kill the ego without killing the body. That's the implication. Know that it certainly is Aruna Hill. So Bhagavan understands very well the anguish that leads people to want to give up the body. But obviously giving up the body is not the solution, because the body is a mere growth from the root, which is ego. So long as the root remains, if one body dies, another body will sprout out. So killing the body is not a solution. So for those who want to give up this life, who want to bring this embodied existence to an end, not only the end of this body, but our very rising as ego and taking a body as I. If we want to bring this to an end, having given up desire for this defective life, because of recognizing that it's just ever expanding misery, there is on earth one rare medicine. That rare medicine is this Arunachala Hill. And what do we have to do? We have to just think of it once. Because if we think of it once, as he said in the previous verse, it will start its work within our heart. It will slowly subdue the outward going activity of the mind. It will draw the mind in to face itself, and it will thereby make the mind motionless like itself, and then it will consume it. So if mere killing of the body is not a solution to our problems. Bhagavan understands what makes, Bhagavan recognizes very clearly what drives people to commit suicide, but knowing that suicide is not a solution, he's given us the perfect solution. Take refuge in Arunachala. If you take refuge in Arunachala, Arunachala will kill you and thereby bestow the deathless state upon you. The true deathless state, the state which is beyond birth and death, beyond all embodiment, beyond all pairs of opposites, all dualities, all suffering, beyond everything. That is our real state. That is what Arunachala will give us. But in order to receive what Arunachala is always ready to give us, we must be willing to surrender ourselves completely. And how can we surrender ourselves? By turning our attention within to face Arunachala, who is always shining in our heart as eye. So for Bhagavan, there's no distinction between the outward form of Arunachala and the inward form of Arunachala ever shining in our heart as eye. The outward form of Arunachala is just an outward manifestation. It appears outwardly in order to turn our attention back within. And to us, Arunachala appears like an insentient hill. But Bhagavan, in Bhagavan's view, through its silence, Arunachala was always teaching us. And what Arunachala was teaching us, what Arunachala is always teaching us through silence, Bhagavan revealed in verse 44 of Arunachala Aksharamlai. Yes, verse 44. Tirumbi aham, turning within. Tane dinam ahakankan, see yourself daily or constantly with the inner eye. Inner eye means the power of attention, inward facing attention. Terium, it will be known. Endrane and Arunachala, thus you said, my Arunachala. So Arunachala is there, standing as a seemingly insentient hill, but ever teaching us through silence to turn within. And turning within, and thereby committing ego side, is the solution to all our miseries. Body side will not solve our problems. Usually when people talk about suicide, they mean killing of the body, which is what I call body side. That's not the solution. We need ego side, killing of the ego. That is the true suicide. And that is the goal of Bhagavan's teachings. But only if we kill this ego will we attain salvation, will we attain our real state. So I hope that that to some extent answers the question. Mere killing of the body is just it's of no, there's no benefit to be gained. It's a fruitless activity. It may seem to be a solution, but it's not a solution, because it's just bringing one dream to an end. And because the dream has survived, the dreams will continue. So killing of the body is not recommended at all. It's a false solution. We may think it's a solution, but it's not actually a solution, because all our suffering is caused not by body, but by ego. Because we rise as ego, we are aware of ourselves as if this body were ourselves, but this body is not ourselves. So we need to separate ourselves from this body by killing ego. That is the solution to all our problems. The third question was one asked by Sanjay. Sanjay, would you like to ask the question? I don't know if is Sanjay here?
Hello, can I ask now?
Yeah, my voice? Please ask.
Yes. So, sir, recently a friend commented on your latest video Today itself I read it. There is absolutely no good reason to want to exist in the world. I'll repeat. There is absolutely no good reason to want to exist in this world. Now, the truth of this statement is quite thought-provoking. What he says seems to be so true and striking. This ego doesn't seem to have a single reason even to exist. So all its aims and ambitions are completely misplaced. This is what I feel. So we need to impress upon this ego in clear and forceful terms that it has no business even existing. So it should surrender as quickly as possible. I will be glad if you could expand on this so that we become more and more willing to surrender completely. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yes, that it is true. There is no good reason to want to exist. But as ego, the very nature of ego is is its desire to exist. So this desire to exist as ego will remain until we surrender ourselves completely. So these are all, whatever way we look at it, ego is the problem. But ego is not something other than ourselves. It is we who are now talking, we who are asking questions and seeking answers, and trying to understand Bhagavan's teachings. This I who's doing all these things, this is ego. This is the problem. But ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourself. It is not something other than our real nature. In substance, it's the same. It is our real nature, but in appearance, it's something else, because our real nature is pure awareness. Awareness that is never aware of anything other than itself. But when we rise as ego, we are aware of things that seem to be other than ourselves, and we are aware of ourselves as one among those things, in this body. So our rising as ego is the source of all trouble. When in sleep, when we don't rise as ego, we have no problems. In sleep, we are free we are free of ego, and consequently we are free of the desire to exist as ego. But because ego hasn't destroyed itself, it keeps on rising again and again. So as ego, we need to follow this path that Bhagavan has taught us. As you say, Sanjay, we need to impress upon ourselves that we have no business existing as ego. But we can impress this upon ourselves to some extent by studying Bhagavan's teachings, thinking about them. But to effectively impress this upon ourselves, we need to put his teachings into practice by constantly trying to turn our attention within and thereby surrender ourselves to him. Slowly, slowly, the truth of his teachings will sink deeper and deeper into our heart, will impress upon our heart more and more forcibly. And then we will have less and less desire to rise and go outwards, and more love to subside back within. So as with every question, it comes back to the only solution is to put what Bhagavan taught us into practice. To try to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves. More than that, I don't think there's anything more to say.
Thank you, sir.
As ego, we have so many desires, but we can overcome those desires only by putting what Bhagavan taught us into practice.
Thank you, sir.
There were some other written questions. I'll just deal with a few more quickly, and then to give other people opportunity to ask questions. Blossom, would you like to ask the question the questions you had asked?
Hello. Yeah, my question, I had a few questions, but my first question is, you say that, I mean, it says that we are not the doer. So
Yeah.
I would just like to know, who is the doer?
Good question. This can be answered from various angles. If we take it just, now we feel we are the doer. Why do we feel we are the doer? There are three instruments of action: mind, speech, and body. Because we identify these as ourself, whatever actions are done by mind, speech, or body, we experience them as actions done by us. I am thinking, I am speaking, I am sitting or standing or walking or whatever. We identify, because these instruments seem to be ourself, we whatever actions they do seem to us to be actions done by ourselves. This is how doership arises. So we cannot be free of doership so long as we are aware of ourselves as I am this body. This body means it encompasses the mind and the speech and everything. When we rise as ego, we automatically experience whatever actions the body, mind, or speech are doing. We experience them as actions done by ourselves. That is how doership arises. The other way in which this question could be answered, particularly in the Bhakti Marga, God is often referred to as the Karta, the doer, because ultimately everything is done by God. From a certain perspective, that is. Actually, according to Bhagavan, God does not do anything. But from the perspective of ego, we can say God does everything. We should surrender everything to the will of God and let him do everything. We shouldn't interfere. And so in that sense, God can also be called the doer, but that's from a different perspective. Then if you want to ask your second, is that an adequate answer to your question, first question?
Kind of, but I was wondering, if we are the self, then I don't know, part of the doer, like you said, is done automatically, like you said, like a magnet. It's all just being done and it's nothing to do with us. So then I just come back to the thing, what has this whole story got to do with us then, if it's not our dream? Why are we involved in it?
Okay, well, the dream is not, it's not our real nature that is dreaming. The dreamer is ego. As ego, we dream this. And when we dream, we always dream ourselves as a person within our dream. This is why what you had written is, also, if I am the self and this whole universe is an illusion that comes out of me, therefore, can I not change karma rules, and can I not make the world how I want it? No, is the simple answer to that. The reason is, when we're dreaming, the whole dream is a creation of our own mind, but we aren't able to change the dream at will. If we're being chased by a monster, for example, we can't just will that monster out of existence. The reason we cannot change a dream while dreaming is that though the dream is our own creation, we dream ourselves to be a creature within our creation. In other words, we dream ourselves to be a person within the dream world. As a person, because while dreaming, we take ourselves to be that small person who is itself a part of a dream. As that person, we cannot change the dream. That is why, and according to Bhagavan, our present state is just a dream. But now, though this is our dream, we mistake ourselves to be a person within this dream. The person we now mistake ourselves to be is a part of the dream. So because we seem to be part of this dream, I mean, it'd be very nice if we could just will this coronavirus crisis away, but we're not able to do so because because we who want to be free of this coronavirus problem are as much a part of the dream as the coronavirus. Do you understand what I mean there?
I kind of do. So like, we are creators, but it kind of like we're watching the film, but we're not in the film, but we feel we're in the film, and we feel we can do things in the film, which we can't. We should just watch the film.
There's a difference.
And have no,
When we're watching a film, we are watching as a spectator. When we are dreaming, we are watching as a participator. Though in effect, when we're watching a dream, we generally identify with a particular character and see through their eyes. We know all along while watching a film, this is a film, I'm separate. We're aware of that distinction. But while dreaming, our actual experience is, I am this body, I am this person who is part of a dream that we are dreaming. That's why we recognize a dream to be a dream only when we wake up. While we are dreaming, it seems to be waking. It seems to be a real state. Because we identify ourselves with the body in that dream, that body seems, because the body seems to be ourselves and we are real, the body seems to be real consequently. And because the body is a part of the world, the whole world seems to be real. Only when we leave that dream and come to another dream, our identification with the dream body is broken. We no longer identify that dream body as I. We no longer experience that dream body as I. So we see it from outside, as it were, and we say, oh, that was just a dream. But so long as we're dreaming, the dream seems to be the waking state. Because we are a part of it. Does that answer that?
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
And you have one more question?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think you should come to questions and answers. Otherwise, I'll have questions all day. I can wait till the next session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, the fifth person who asked some questions in writing was Prasant and Smita. Would you like to ask your questions now?
Please, could you read the questions on our behalf? That's nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. What you had asked was 3 questions about free will and destiny. The first one was, how do we process the atrocities against fellow beings as being something preordained? For example, mass murders and wars. Well, it's a matter. Many things happen we are now dreaming. In this dream, all sorts of things happen. Some things seem to be quite pleasant. Some things seem to be, as you say, they're atrocities. Everything that we experience is our destiny. It's our destiny to experience these things. Certain things happen, like we read in the news about mass murders and wars and things. These generally don't have much impact on us, because if we read the newspaper every day there's some we seldom find good news in the newspaper, because what is good is not news. It's all the things that are going wrong which are news. So we read about wars, we read about mass murders, but because they're things far away, it usually doesn't have much impact on us. But sometimes we may find ourselves to be in the midst of a war or caught up in something. But this is all, it's all our destiny. It's all been preordained, but we should experience these things. If we take it, there are 2 ways of taking these things. One is we can accept that there are many jivas, and each jiva has its own past karmas, which it is experiencing in this life. That is the more ordinary level of viewing things. Bhagavan has taught us, has tried to take us deeper. He says, actually in a dream, though while you're dreaming, there seem to be many people experiencing the same dream world. But when you wake up, you recognize that you alone were experiencing the dream world. It wasn't any of the people in the dream who were experiencing it. You were the only experiencer. And the one who was experiencing it wasn't even the person you seemed to be in a dream. It's as ego, we dream a dream. In the dream, we take ourselves to be a person, and we see a world. Because we take ourselves to be a person, we think that person is experiencing the world, and we think all the other people are likewise experiencing. Whereas actually the experiencer is only ego, that which has projected the dream and which takes itself to be a certain person within the dream. So if we take this view, then there's only one ego, and that ego is experiencing the fruits of its past karmas. So whatever you perceive in this world is a fruit of your past karmas. So yes, it's all preordained. If you undergo some suffering, that is for some good purpose. We may not understand the reason why we are suffering, but it will. In past lives, we've done countless agamya. Agamya means actions that we do according to our will. And in each lifetime, we're only able to experience a fraction of the fruit of all the agamya that we've done in the past. So how is it decided which actions, which fruit we experience in each lifetime? That is decided by God or Guru. And God or Guru selects from a vast heap called Sanchita. Sanchita literally means a heap. That's a heap of the fruit of our past actions, which haven't yet been experienced by us. God selects selects fruit that will be beneficial for our spiritual development. So whatever we may experience in this lifetime, in everyone's life, there's a mixture of pleasure and pain. Some people may seem to have more pleasurable lifetime. Those who have money, who are born with privilege, and there are people who seem to be very fortunate. There are people who seem to be very unfortunate. But even in the life of the most unfortunate, they experience their own small pleasures in one way or another. And the people who seem to have most pleasures, they also have most worries about. I mean, if you've got $1 billion or something, you've also got $1 billion worth of worries. But having $1 billion, you don't want to lose it. You want to multiply it to get $10 billion. So nobody is free of trouble. The very nature of embodied existence is misery. And the more desire we have, the more miserable our life will be. There are people who undergo extreme hardship in life, but they're always cheerful because they're ready to accept whatever happens. To that extent, they are surrendered. So they are able to be cheerful even in the face of adversity. Whereas there are other people who have all the privileges and everything that anyone could want, but they're still miserable. So ultimately, it's what causes happiness and misery is our own desires. The more desire we have, the more misery we experience. The less desire we have, the more carefree our life will be. So just because we see someone living what may seem to be a miserable existence, having to work long hours every day, sometimes we find even the people in the most adverse situations are the most cheerful. So what is important is not what we experience, it's the extent to which we are ready to surrender our likes and dislikes. That is what is important. I don't know if that's a bit of an oblique answer to your question, but I hope that what I said may be of some use. Or is there anything more you want to ask?
No, Swami. That was perfectly nice. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question you asked is, how do we understand people who are born with defects and those babies who die at a very young age? Do we assume that these souls never get the chance to find the true self and would have to reincarnate? Well, it's not just those who are born who die young. Most of us have to reincarnate, because until we reincarnate means we have to continue dreaming one dream after another. If in one life we die young, that dream is cut short. It's just a brief dream. Other dreams, when we may live to 100 years old, they're longer dreams. But they're all dreams, and in each life, the benefit we can gain from each life is by following the spiritual path. We can slowly reduce the strength of our desires and attachments, our likes and dislikes. The more we do so, that the more we surrender ourselves, the closer we come to finding our true self. So the purpose of embodied existence is ultimately just to follow the spiritual path. In other words, the path of surrender, to surrender ourselves, to surrender our desires and attachments, our likes and dislikes. To the extent we surrender them, to that extent we are progressing in the spiritual path. Whether some people are born with defects, but some people are born with defects but can still live a fulfilling life, like Richard Dawkins, I forget. He had an extreme disability, but he was able to be a brilliant scientist. He led what must have been for him a fulfilling life. There are other people who are born with a healthy body, but still they don't live a fulfilling life because they squander it in seeking pleasures or whatever. So we cannot. God alone knows which fruit of past actions will be beneficial for us to experience in this lifetime, and gives us accordingly. So we don't have to worry about all these things. Ultimately, all questions about, Bhagavan did teach us about the karma theory, but he taught us for a purpose. But we need to understand the reason why Bhagavan taught us the karma theory. He taught us for one reason and one reason alone. If we understand the karma theory as taught by Bhagavan, we will know whatever is destined to happen in our life is going to happen. We cannot change anything. Therefore, it's futile to be concerned about the outward events of our life. Whatever happens in our outward life, we need not be concerned about this. Now, for example, everyone is worried about this coronavirus. So we may be worried how this is going to, whether we're going to get sick and die, or how this is going to impact our career or our employment, whether we're going to lose our job, whether our company we work for is still going to be running after the end of all this. But this uncertainty in the present world situation must be creating worries for so many people. But if we understand that whatever is destined to happen is going to happen, we cannot change anything, then we don't have to concern ourselves about these things. The only thing we need to concern ourselves about is turning our attention within and surrendering ourselves. So we need to understand that the soul, whatever Bhagavan taught us, the sole purpose of Bhagavan, everything Bhagavan taught us is to motivate us to investigate ourselves and surrender ourselves. And then there was one other final question you asked. What was Bhagavan's teaching around the origin of life and the very purpose of creation? Well, what Bhagavan taught us about the origin of life is very clearly expressed by him in verse 26 of Uludunapadu. Ahande undayin anatum undahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahande indrail indru anatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahande yabamam. Ego itself is everything. So the origin of life is our rising as ego. And the purpose of this life is to cease rising as ego. That may seem paradoxical to say, but it's like saying that the purpose of a dream is to make us understand that we should wake up. When we recognize that a dream is a dream, we should put an end to it by waking up. So ultimately, that is the sole purpose of creation. In fact, creation has no purpose. It is only our rising as ego, which is a mistake on our part. We should never have risen as ego. And if we investigate ourselves keenly enough, Bhagavan says we will see that actually we have never risen as ego. Actually, we are always as we always were, as just pure awareness, immutable and ever unchanging. So all questions about creation and the purpose of creation, ultimately, the ultimate answer is, in whose view does creation seem to exist? In the view of ourself as ego. So who am I? If we investigate ourselves, we'll see that we are not this ego, that there never was any creation, and that that which is always is as it is, without ever undergoing any change whatsoever. So when we ask questions, we need to understand that the only beneficial answer that can be given to any question is that answer which will turn our attention back within to investigate ourselves. Because only by investigating ourselves can we surrender ourselves, and only by surrendering ourselves can we be free of all these problems. Does that answer your questions sufficiently? Okay.
I have a question, Swamiji.
Yes.
What would be the dharma now? For example, if someone is totally into a spiritual world from the time he wakes up, he's totally into self-enquiry, and then when he works, he's into that, and then the more chances of that person to be more into that spiritual realm, and he's no more interested in working. It's not the question of working. He's no more interested in anything like you make money on the worldly affairs. So in that situation, and if he decides to, completely lead a spiritual life, what would be the dharma of wife? What should we be following the husband's path? I'm asking about my husband, so because he's completely into this from the time he wakes up till the time he sleeps. So if he decides, yes, I wanted to be a full-time time into this, so what would be my dharma as a wife?
Well, firstly, it's not up to him to decide. He can decide, I want to give up all this work, I don't want to do any more work. But if it's his destiny to work, he cannot avoid it.
Okay.
Bhagavan said, just like marriage comes according to destiny, there's outward forms of renunciation, that's giving up work or even becoming a sannyasi or whatever, that's also according to destiny. So the work that this body has to do, it will be made to do. So you need not be concerned about that. If it's all outward things have already been predetermined. And what is our dharma? Bhagavan has given us a very simple dharma, a dharma of surrender. The more we subside, the more we surrender, the better it is for us. The happier our life will be. Happiness doesn't lie in accumulating material wealth or any of these things. Happiness lies only in renouncing our desires and attachments, our likes and dislikes, and ultimately the root of all these things, ego. This is what, as Bhagavan said, this is the true Swadharma. Swadharma means the dharma of oneself.
Okay.
Our real dharma is this surrender. This surrender can be practiced whatever our outward life may be, whether we happen to be a sannyasi or whether we happen to be a grahasta, whether we happen to have a job, whether we happen to be rich or happen to be poor, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Surrender is an inward path, and this is the the most beneficial path we can follow, because our ultimate aim is moksha or whatever, mukti or annihilation of ego. That may or may not happen soon, we don't know. It all depends on how much we surrender ourselves, but we need not concern ourselves about that. Surrender is beneficial here and now. Every time we reduce the strength of our desires and attachment, every time we as ego subside that little bit more, we are more carefree, we are more happy. Bhagavan has given a beautiful analogy about this path for all of us. If we're following Bhagavan, we should be following the path of surrender. Bhagavan says, when you're traveling on a train, you know that the train is carrying all the burdens. So why should you carry your little luggage on your head? If you put the luggage aside on the seat, you can travel comfortably and happily without suffering. Or if you want, you can carry your luggage on your head and suffer, but it makes no difference because the train is carrying the burden. Whether you think you have to carry it on your head. So all our thinking, but we are responsible for this outward life. What work we have to do in the outer world, that work our body, speech, and mind will be made to do. That is no concern of ours. Our only concern should be turning within and thereby surrendering ourselves. So the dharma of the wife, the dharma of the husband, the dharma of the sannyasi, all are the same.
Okay.
The only true dharma, ultimately, is the dharma of surrender. This is the dharma that Bhagavan taught us. If we have other aims in life, if we want to acquire wealth, then there are certain restrictions. So we can say, if you want to acquire wealth in an honest way. Don't cheat people. This, that. Such things are necessary for those who have other ambitions. But if our sole ambition is to be happy, then the path is surrender is the only dharma we have.
Okay, thank you, Swamiji. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. And would anyone else like to ask any questions?
Hi, Michael. It's probably an extension of a question that I asked you by email a couple of weeks ago. And I think you gave a well-rounded answer, but I think there's still some curiosity. It's probably to do with the maybe like the depth of the dream that our ego creates. And I guess there's some question in there about the boundary between that and being nihilistic or not being nihilistic, ideally. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. You said earlier, just probably a throwaway comment, but you said something like, at the moment we're all, suffering to some extent during this coronavirus thing that's happening. I suppose, taking that example, my question would be, is the only one suffering or not suffering ourselves, really? Is the entire thing just a creation of our ego that exists only to the mind? So I don't know if that makes any sense. I hope it does. Is anybody else? I think I said to you the other week, I'm asking, I'm emailing you a question, but essentially, are you just an aspect of my own ego? Am I asking it to myself? I guess that's the same thing. Yeah.
Well, different levels of spiritual teachings are given. So suitable to different contexts and also suitable to different levels at which not everyone is ready to accept the deepest teachings. So not all people who follow the path of Advaita are ready to accept that this is all just a dream.
Yeah.
But according to Bhagavan is always trying to push us deeper and deeper. So if we want to go deep in the spiritual path, the best explanation for all that we experience is that all this is just a dream.
Right. Yeah.
In a dream, there is only one dreamer, and the dream is experienced only by that one dreamer. in the dreamer's dream, the dreamer, it always mistakes itself to be a person in its dream. And
Yeah.
many other people. The
Sure.
dreamer is ego. So because the ego mistakes itself to be a person, it mistakes every person to be an ego. So in our view, there seem to be many other egos in this world, and all these egos seem to be seeing the world just as we are. So long as we are looking outwards, in effect, we have to act as if there are many other jivas, many other egos.
Yeah.
We have to act according to, in a manner that is appropriate to the dream, because what is acting? What is acting is mind, speech, and body. That is the person we seem to be. That is not what we actually are. So when our attention is facing outwards, in effect, we are we can say in effect there are many people, many jivas. But in actuality, there's only one, because in a dream, there's only one dreamer. And where that teaching becomes relevant is when we are turning within. So long as we believe this world exists independent of our perception of it, and that it's perceived by many other people, we will continue to have attachment for it. To the extent to which we are willing to accept that all this is just my own mental creation, our attachment to it will be reduced, and it will be easier for us to turn within.
Right. Yeah.
Then we have to let go of everything else. And we're able to let go of other things only to the extent we are willing to give up our attachment to them, our desire for them, our likes and dislikes.
Yes.
So, as I say, very different levels of teaching that may be applicable for different situations. But if we want to go deep in this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, it's most appropriate to accept the dream explanation and to accept that we are the only one and that all the other people we see exist in our view. Even the person we seem to be, even Dan, this shows your view. You are not Dan.
No.
You are the one who is dreaming I am Dan.
Yes. That confirms my suspicions. I'm not sure if it makes it any easier for the ego to let go, obviously.
Well,
but I totally.
But to
totally
the extent
understand.
we are willing to accept this means that at least to that extent we're willing to begin letting go. We may none of us are ready to let go entirely. If we were ready to let go entirely, the story would be over and we wouldn't be here.
We'd be having this imaginary conversation.
Exactly. But by following the path Bhagavan has shown us, by trying to turn our attention within more and more, we are reducing the strength of our desires and attachments. And the more they reduce, the deeper within we will be able to go. So it's a gradual process.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, pleasure.
Hi, Michael. I had a question for you. It's a practical question for me. Just in terms of context, all my reading and my questioning seems to have been very useful in that it's brought me to here.
Yes.
And it's given me some understanding and dispelled some ignorant notions I had. But I'm just starting to get an intuitive feel that there's no end to my questions. So I've become more interested, so to speak, in what I think you may have called the razor's edge before, or certainly that space where one just lets be rather than being this or that. Now, my question's a practical one about that, because I appear to be able to just rest quietly in that space without anything, and one feels as though there's a glimpse of something there, but quite quickly the mind or the ego wants to almost grasp and come in there and almost analyze that free space of being. And my question is really about confidence, really, because that feels intuitively right to just be. And it's still very much a case of the ego's there lurking around. I know that because it likes to look at what's going on. But I'm just interested in your experience of, is that the right kind of approach of just resting there in a very effortless, non-judgmental way, and just let it be. And hopefully with more time, so to speak, it becomes easier and things drop off of their own accord, such as interest in that space and desires, etc. I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's very difficult to tell from a description, because the state we are aiming for is a state that is beyond description. That is, we can describe phenomena, we cannot describe awareness. We cannot describe ourselves, what we actually are. So we are trying to withdraw our attention from all phenomena, from everything that appears and disappears, and to hold on to just ourselves, just the basic fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. It's when you describe what you've described, it's because what we are aiming for cannot be described. It is difficult for me to know whether what you're describing is a subtle type of phenomena or whether it's something beyond phenomena, if you see what I mean. So all I can say is we need to, whatever we may experience, our aim is not to experience anything, whether a peace or anything. Our aim is just to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is, we need to cling ever more firmly just to our own being awareness, our own awareness of our own existence. More than this word, we cannot, that is, words are inadequate for this. Words are nothing more than pointers. And Bhagavan often used to say, the only way to learn, to find out how to investigate yourself is to investigate yourself. It's a bit like the only way to learn to ride a bicycle is to ride a bicycle. It's only by experience that we learn how to ride a bicycle. Likewise on this path. So I'm not sure that I can answer your question. I think that you just have to continue doing what you're doing. And but remember, this isn't, I think it's also important to remember what we are practicing is not just a meditation. Though we can describe this path as a path of meditating on ourselves, it is first and foremost an investigation. So it is something, again, words fail here, because what I almost said is that meditation is something passive, whereas investigation is something active. But that gives a completely different meaning to what I actually intend. We are looking for something. But what we are looking for is just ourselves. It's not something new. We are looking for what is ever present, but what is concealed, not by its absence, because it is ever present, but by the presence of other things. So, yeah, it's very difficult to put it to put it adequately into words. But from what you said, all I can say is continue investigating, continue. The sort of question you've asked now is a question to which ultimately you alone can find out the answer. Does that make any sense, what I've said?
Yes, it does. Thank you. It's for me, it's as you say, it's almost, I'm waking up to the need, so to speak, of divesting my attention from all else, basically. And it feels okay to do that, but it feels strange, but it only feels strange to my ego because obviously it's used to doing certain things. But I'm going to keep going. But thank you anyway.
Ego doesn't want to. Ego doesn't want to let go of its moorings. It wants to hold on to something. But the only thing we're in self-investigation, ego is trying to hold on to itself, which it's unwilling to do, because holding on to itself is signing its own death warrant. It's literally committing suicide. So it tries to find something to hold on to. As you say, it starts assessing the experience and judging it and analyzing it. This is just another way of ego rising and grasping something other than itself.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yes, hi Michael, and hi everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. My question is basically an extension of the question others have asked already, so but I'll still ask it. The question is basically the conflict. It's really a conflict, I feel, between the surrender of ego and rise of the ego. Is it, the question really is it also in our destiny, whether the surrender is successful? Because yeah, when we do self-enquiry and are in a space, in a pleasant, very we are ourselves. It seems to be the place to be, but somehow the ego keeps rising, like the person before me mentioned. It keeps rising and rising. So is it really, is it also our destiny, whether the surrender is successful or not? And even the exit, because of that, even the exit doesn't seem to be in our control anyways. So, and the second part of the question is, how can we be sure that even the surrender is not a desire?
Okay. Well, the first question, surrender has nothing to do with destiny. Destiny is the fruit of our past actions. If the fruit of past actions, all actions are finite, so their fruits are finite. So whereas surrender results in the annihilation of everything, and what remains then is infinite. So the moksha, which is the experience of what is infinite, can never be brought about by action of any sort. So it has nothing to do with destiny. Surrender is entirely it depends entirely on our willingness to surrender. It is we as ego who are clinging on to things other than ourselves. We can let go of everything else only when we are willing to do so. So surrender has absolutely nothing to do with destiny. It's got everything to do with bhakti. Bhakti means love. To the extent to which we are willing to let go and to hold on only to our own real nature, which is what is always shining in us as our fundamental awareness, I am. That depends entirely upon bhakti and vairagya. Bhakti means that beloved to hold on to I am. Vairagya means the willingness to let go of everything else. So the surrender has, as I say, it has nothing to do with destiny. Destiny may give favorable circumstances to bring us round to a surrendered state of mind, but ultimately, whatever our destiny may be, we are free from moment to moment, whether to continue clinging to things other than ourselves or whether to cling only to ourselves. If we cling only to ourselves, that is surrendering everything, including ourselves. So that was your first question. Sorry, what was the second question?
I think it answers the second question too. How can we be sure that surrender is also not a desire? Okay. How can we be sure that
right.
the will to surrender is also the play of the ego?
It is ego that has desires. so long as ego has desires, it will not be, and ego's desires are for things other than itself. Surrender is not something other than ourselves. Surrender means letting go of everything other than ourselves, holding on to ourselves alone. So surrender is possible only with love. I can explain this in another way. In a loving relationship, supposing you're married and you're in love with your wife, you want to, or you have children, you love your children. In a loving relationship, the measure of the love is not what we can get from the other person, the person we love, it's what we can give to them. And the greatest of all gifts is the gift of ourselves. So to the extent that we give ourselves to a person we love, that is the measure of, that is a sign that we really love that person, if we're ready to give. If we're wanting something from a relationship, then it's a relationship of desire. I will love you provided you give me what I want. That is not love. That is a relationship of desire. And what most people call love in a worldly sense is actually desire. We're fine with the relationship so long as it's favorable to us. When we're not getting what we want, then the relationship undergoes some difficult times. So to the extent that we are focused on giving rather than on taking, to that extent is it really love. And in surrender, we are giving everything. We're not taking anything. The reward for surrender, I mean, if we're wanting something, we are not surrendering. To the extent that we have any desire at all, then desire is the very antithesis of surrender. When we are ready to let go of everything, that is true surrender. And when we let go of everything, what remains is what always exists, which is the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality, the only reality. That is our real nature. So surrender, as I say, it's the very antithesis of desire. So long as we have desire to achieve something, we are not surrendering. We should have, the only legitimate desire is the desire to give up all desires. Does that answer your question adequately?
Yes, so the rise of the ego is really because of all the desires.
In a sense, yes. But the nature
Correct.
of ego, yes. The nature of ego is to have desire. The desires don't exist before ego, so it's a bit difficult to say. There's no adequate explanation for the rising of ego, because ego is the first cause. The first cause, there's no cause preceding it. So ego is what causes everything else. But the very nature of ego is to have desire. As Bhagavan says in the verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri nitkum, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu mika ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. So grasping is the very nature of ego. The word Bhagavan used in Tamil for grasping is patri, which is a verb. The noun form of that verb is patru, which means attachment. So ego is, attachment is the very nature of ego. Attachment or desire is the very nature of ego. We can't exactly say that it causes ego, because obviously without ego, who is to have desire or attachment? But it is the nature of ego to have desire and attachment. And to the extent that we are willing to surrender, to give up our desires and attachment, to that extent, ego will subside. But we cannot get rid of all desire and attachment completely without cutting up the root. The root is ego. So if instead of trying to surrender ego, we only try to surrender our desires and attachments, we chop off one and another one sprouts. We need to cut up the root. That is the In answer to an earlier question, that is the real suicide, the ego side. That is our aim, complete surrender. Surrender not only of our desires, but of desirer, the one who has desires. Does that answer that adequately?
Yes, that definitely does. Thank you so much, Michael.
So firstly, thank you so much, Michael. I've been listening to your videos for a year and a half now, and I've been learning a lot from that. So my question is basically a personal question. It's been troubling me for quite some time now, but I think you can help me. So I'll just give you a background as to why I'm asking you this question. I'm in my late 20s, and I've come across Bhagavan 3 years ago, and I've been I'm actually into a software company, and I've been doing really well there. I've been a manager handling a team of 20 people, but it was too much of a stress to me, so I was not able to concentrate on what the actual teachings were. So one day I decided that I need to ask Bhagavan to put me in a job where I'll be individual and I'll be able to concentrate more on the teachings. And fortunately, that did happen. And I'm into a place where I'm alone, where I do my job, and that's about it. I don't have a team to handle it. But a lot of my friends who got to know about this, they say that you made a very wrong decision with your life, where you're going very well in a company and you've given up all of that and joined a company where you have to be under people who are less experienced than you. I know whatever is being done is for my good, but mind always keeps telling me that I'm not doing the right thing. In this kind of scenario, I don't know what to do. Is it because I've asked that Bhagavan has done what I wanted, or is it because it was my destiny that this all happened? I'm really stuck. Is it a punishment or something? I don't know.
No. Firstly, all these things, it may seem to us that it's because of our decision, but certain things have happened. But because it was destined for you to change your job, you were destined to make that decision. That is one thing. Second thing, the worldly people will naturally look upon those of us who are inclined to follow the spiritual path and think that we are making wrong decisions, that we are turning our back on the pleasures of life and the opportunities to accumulate wealth and everything. We should not be swayed by these people, because we know life has a higher purpose. That having more wealth or more this or more that is futile, because anyway, this body, how long are we in this world? We may be here 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years, whatever, but this is all a passing dream. Nothing is going to last. Even if you were in a better job and were able to earn more money and what's the benefit ultimately? It's all a passing show. So if Bhagavan has prompted you to opt for a simpler job where you can devote more time to his teachings, well and good. That's nothing to regret about that. You need not. But if you're feeling dilemma about whether should I have done this, shouldn't I have done this, bear in mind what Bhagavan said is nothing can happen that is not destined to happen. Whatever is destined to happen will not fail to happen. So all that has happened, you're changing from one job to another, that's all according to destiny. So all that matters, I mean, you that decision was accompanied by a wish to devote more time to following Bhagavan's teachings. So it's whatever we do in order to try to put this Bhagavan teachings into more and more into practice will not go in vain. So it is it has happened, and it has happened for good. So you need not have any regrets about it. Does that answer your question? Or I feel maybe I missed something that you had asked, but
No, Michael, that really answers my question. Thank you so much, Michael.
I like to talk about ask about more the surrender. If one needs to surrender towards the true self, this in true sense does it mean to go in a roller coaster in life? So how do we buffer ourselves so that the journey in life is less fluctuant?
The journey in life is already pre-planned. You cannot change the journey. Means the outward events of your life are already predetermined. You cannot change. Surrender, it comes about when we recognize our inability to change anything. So whatever is already, what is destined to happen is going to happen. You cannot change that. But instead of, you're sitting on the train, the destination the train is going to go to, it's going to go to whatever you do. So whether you carry your luggage on your head or put it aside, you're going to reach your destination. So surrender is inwardly giving up our desires and attachments. The more we give up our desires and attachments, the less we'll be buffeted by life. Events may happen, but very disturbing events may happen in our life, but we won't be so disturbed. But to the extent that we surrender ourselves, we will not be disturbed by them.
How about the power of attraction? You know, nowadays.
The power of what?
Nowadays they talk about the power of attraction. You think of positive things, and those that you can detour your destiny, whatever they say, you know.
These are all worldly philosophies. According to Bhagavan, what you're destined to get, you'll get. What you're destined not to get, you will not get. But worldly people who have desires, they imagine that if you think positive thoughts, then you'll get what you desire. This is all wishful thinking. These people who propagate this, often they're people who are very successful, what they call self-help gurus or whatever. And they happen to have found some way of earning a lot of money by selling these ideas, and they tell this to thousands of others, but not everyone is going to have the same good fortune that they had, or so-called good fortune in a worldly sense. So this power of attraction is a worldly myth. It has nothing to do with the spiritual path. The spiritual path is not about fulfilling our desires, but giving up our desires. So it's the very antithesis of spirituality, this belief in the power of attraction or whatever, positive thinking or.
Yes, thank you, Michael. But there's one more thing I've seen that, but sometimes by surrendering and you become a bit more detached in life.
Yes.
And then how to be detached but fully alive also, not becoming aloof.
We have to first decide what is our aim in life. Are we seeking worldly pleasures, or are we seeking to surrender ourselves? If we're seeking to surrender ourselves, okay, for most of us, we don't yet have sufficient vairagya. We still do have some desire for pleasures of life, but we've got to think, what is our ultimate purpose in life? Ultimately, if we want to attain eternal bliss, if we want to attain our real nature, we have to be willing to let go of everything. We may not be willing to let go of everything now, but if we want to follow the spiritual path, we need to at least be willing to begin letting go of things. So we, each one of us, need to decide for ourselves, what is our aim in life? Do we want to experience worldly pleasures, or do we want to surrender ourselves? So this, what you said about this power of attraction, that is fine for people whose aim in life is fulfillment of desires. It won't. This power of attraction is a myth, so it won't help them. But that is a philosophy that will attract those who are seeking the fulfillment of worldly desires. It will not attract those who are drawn to the path of surrender. So we have to decide, what path do we want? Do we want to follow a worldly path of seeking the fulfillment of our desires, or do we want to follow a spiritual path? Most of us are probably following a little bit of both, but slowly we want to edge towards the surrender.
Can't we have both?
No, you cannot.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
We all want to have both, but that's the one thing. That's what we've got to learn. We all. Bhagavan once said, everyone who comes here says they have come only for moksha. But if I show a small sample of moksha, all the crows will fly away and I'll be left sitting here alone. So we want to have moksha and the world, but we can't have both. So slowly, as we follow the spiritual path, slowly we come to understand. But if we want to experience supreme bliss, we must be ready to surrender everything else. But when we surrender everything else, but Bhagavan once said about our reluctance to surrender ourselves. He said it's like a person with a quarter paisa. Those days, a quarter paisa was the smallest coin. A person with a quarter paisa is unwilling to give up that quarter paisa in return for all the wealth in the universe. If we surrender ourselves, if we surrender all our desires, all the petty pleasures of life, we will experience infinite bliss. So which is a good bargain? Surrender is the best bargain we can make, because we're giving up everything else in return for what is eternal and what is real and what is infinite happiness. So though we cannot have both world and moksha together, surrendering this world and all our desires for this world for the sake of moksha is a very good business deal. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'll give up the quarter paisa.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
Wise choice. And I think there's time for. Is there time for Dean to ask a question?
Okay. So hello, Michael from Australia. Nice to meet you.
Yes.
So I've been up through a series of events. I guess got introduced to Bhagavan about in 2008 or so, and have been following a path ever since then, with ups and downs, as one can imagine. My question is sort of a little bit twofold. One is just to test a conclusion, and similar to other questions tonight about, night time, 11 p.m., the question of destiny. And then just a quick follow-up question on that. So I've come to this conclusion from thinking about these things over a number of years, and then recently come to this conclusion that this idea of fate or destiny, or whatever you like, is like that everything since beginningless time, so I can't find the beginning of myself, for instance, is like a recording. So that all of karma, if you like, and destiny is like a recording, so a film or a computer program or a book. So in a sense, everything's already happened, but it's now unfolding in time as though it's a sequence of events. And so my limited view is that things are happening in a cause and effect sort of way, but in a sense, everything's already determined, just as though when a book is written, it's already finished, but you have to work through it page by page. So is that And then the awareness that I am is simply, and the opportunity that I have in terms of free will is just to let that happen and watch the show, I suppose. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
In effect, at least as far as our present life is concerned, our present dream is concerned, the book is already written. We are just turning page by page. So that is true in that sense. Sorry, what was the last thing you asked?
So, well, I wonder whether that was a conclusion. So, yeah, it's like this is a recording. So even if I surrender in a sense, and this relates to other questions tonight, any action that I do in a sense, it's not really me acting. It's already in the book. It's in the story.
Well, no. All that is destined to, all that is to happen to us, all that we are to experience is destined. But as far as our actions are concerned, that's the actions of mind, speech, and body, some of our actions are driven by destiny. For example, if you are destined to experience a certain thing, supposing something is destined to happen, you will be made to make choices to be there, to experience whatever is destined to happen. So certain actions of mind, speech, and body are necessary in order for us to experience what is destined. So those actions are driven by destiny. But at the same time, our will is constantly interfering. It may be my destiny to be a pauper all my life. That doesn't stop me wanting to be rich. It doesn't stop me trying to be rich. I can have as much desire as I like to be rich. I can make as much effort as I can to be rich, but I'm not going to be rich because I'm not destined to be rich. So we are.
And aren't the desires themselves?
No, the desires are not part of.
Aren't the desires themselves a part of the overall character? Mm.
Yeah, they are part of the overall character,
okay.
But that is what we are free to change. We are free to change. We are free to give up our desires. We're free to give up our likes and dislikes, or at least to reduce their strength. We are free to change what we desire. Now we may have so many desires for worldly things, but we slowly we're trying to wean our mind away from its worldly desires and turn it back onto this spiritual path, this path of surrender and self-investigation. So
But just like a character in a book. Mm.
Yes, but it's not so.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah.
The events in the book are destined, but the character is not destined. We are free to change our aims, our desires, we are free to give up our desires for things other than ourselves and to cultivate the love to know ourselves. That is nothing to do with destiny. That's entirely within the freedom of our will.
So that it's not recorded, you could say, in a sense. That's not part of the recording.
What is recorded, the events are recorded, but our response to the events are not recorded.
Okay, I'll contemplate that for a bit. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one follow-up then is, in light of that, how does one, and this is the question of ego, I guess, how does one avoid despair?
How does one avoid despair? But despair will occur to the extent that we haven't surrendered. The solution for despair is surrender. Because the more we surrender, the more we will be content with whatever happens.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you, Michael. Yes, it does, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I did try these Buddhist practice like Vipassana, Zen, and different thing, and it seems to help. And self-inquiry, technically speaking, doesn't have any techniques or anything. It's more of a, since it's not concerned with mind or anything, it doesn't really have a steps or technicalities. But it does make sense now. Just wanted to check with your experience that apart from teaching and knowledge, wisdom thing, is there any kind of a practice you follow, or if you don't follow that you did, or if you have some pointers towards that?
Ever since I came to Bhagavan and began to understand his teachings a little, no practice other than self-investigation appealed to me, because it was so clear to me that this is the direct path, and this is whatever benefit we can get from any other type of practice, we can get more simply and more directly from this practice. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I mean, I totally agree with that. I'm saying, again, my question is there, and when you say self-enquiry, it's by everyone goes abstract or vague when someone asks, like I have been asked by newbies in Ramana Ashram, like, how do you do that? Is there practice? Is there any techniques? And mostly my answer is like, there's nothing really. You just need to go back to teachings, understand that, and apply that in practical sense.
Yes, but I mean, what is
so? Is my understanding right?
Yes, well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. That is, our aim is to know ourselves. In order to know ourselves, we need, in order to see what we actually are, we need to look at ourselves. If someone asks you, what is the method, what is the technique to see the sun? There's no technique, you just have to look at it. But the trouble is, if you look at the sun, you'll get blinded by it. Likewise, in this path, we just have to look at ourselves. And when we see what we actually are, we, this ego, will be, just like the eyes get destroyed by looking at the sun, ego gets destroyed by looking at itself. So looking obviously doesn't mean in a literal sense. Looking in a metaphorical sense, we have to attend to ourselves in order to see what we actually are.
Swamiji, what was your experience when you reached first time, when you entered the ashram the very first time? How did you feel? What did you feel?
I can't really, I mean.
I'm very good, stupid questions.
When I first came to the ashram, I knew very little about Bhagavan. I came with curiosity. But soon after coming, the first book I read was an English translation of Nana, Who Am I? When I read that, I can't pretend that I understood most of it, but the little I understood convinced me, yes, this is what I've been looking for. And yeah, ever since then, I've been trying to follow this path as best I can.
Swami, you would have already spoken to the direct disciples or direct shishyas from Ramana from Ramana Ashram, right? I mean, Bhagavan, who has closely worked with Bhagavan. How was your experience in interacting with those souls who are fortunate enough to see and the teaching directly from Bhagavan?
Yes, when I was first arrived in Tiruvannamalai, that was in 76. There were still many devotees who had lived with Bhagavan, some of them for many, many years. But just because someone has been with Bhagavan for a long time doesn't necessarily mean they've understood him. So there were a few who had a really deep understanding of Bhagavan and his teachings. There were some who didn't really, well, they had their own view. Everyone sees Bhagavan through their own colored glasses. So even those who were with Bhagavan for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that they had understood Bhagavan very deeply. But I was fortunate to be with some who had gone very, very deep into Bhagavan's teachings and had a deep understanding. So I was fortunate.
About this who am I, which is Nanyar, I think the core teachings once me personally was like Nanyar, Upadesundiyar and Ulladanarpada, which were the core teachings. And I'm a bit confused about the talks because there's always a parayana of talks happens at 4 o'clock in AM, wherein they do in the original Tamil. And there was a bit confusion like whether that was the original in English or whether in Tamil, because originally it was recorded in English, but later on it was proofreaded by Bhagavan himself in Tamil. So can it be, talks can be included in the core teaching?
No, talks wasn't recorded in Tamil. Talks was recorded in English. The Tamil translation was done many, many years later by Vishwanatha Swami, and he didn't actually, he started off translating and then he started freely adapting it, because he said that he remembered the conversations and more clearly than what they were recorded in talks. So the Tamil talks is actually in many places quite different to the English book. But talks was recorded with by someone who heard what Bhagavan said. People can only record as much as they understand. Okay, what I said is, talks was recorded in English. It wasn't translated in Bhagavan's lifetime. It wasn't printed in Bhagavan's lifetime. So Bhagavan never read any proofs or anything. It is said that shortly before Bhagavan left his body, the notebook in which it had been recorded was shown to him. But Bhagavan didn't read it or didn't go through it. It was printed only in about 1955 or so, sometime in the 1950s. Many years later, maybe about 1970, in the early 70s, Vishwanatha Swami translated it into Tamil. But when he translated it, at the beginning he was translating more or less as it was. But then as he went on, he was translating it more and more freely. And when he was questioned about that, why the Tamil version is so different to the English version, he said, well, I was there at the time, and I remember more clearly than what is recorded in the English book. The English book is often, doesn't convey the meaning correctly. So I wrote in Tamil what I remember Bhagavan saying. But all these books, whoever records anything, they can only record what they understand, not what Bhagavan actually said. Because supposing you're listening to a conversation and afterwards you try and reproduce the conversation, you will not be able to reproduce it word for word. You'll only reproduce what you understood of the conversation. So it is through the filter of another person's understanding that books like talks came into existence. So there are some nice things in talks. Bhagavan's teachings are there here and there, but it's not such an accurate recording of his teachings. Moreover, Bhagavan was answering questions asked by all sorts of people, many of them whom were not, or most of whom were not following his path. So Bhagavan adapted his teachings according to the needs of individuals. So you just have to read talks, and you can see there are many places in talks where it's not at all clear what is being said. Whereas if you read Bhagavan's original works, Bhagavan is very, very clear. Clarity is the hallmark of Bhagavan and his teachings.
Yeah, I get that. Since I was reading in Tamil, I started reading in English, then I revisited everything in Tamil. But I had this wrong information that the Tamil translation of talks was proofreaded by Bhagavan himself, so I considered it as a core teaching. But since you said it's not so, maybe it was a wrong information.
Yeah.
So
in some respects, the Tamil
book to the Nanyar, Upadesundiyar.
In some respects, the Tamil book may be better than the English book, but even Vishwanatha Swami he was not entirely following Bhagavan's teachings. He was more of a follower of Kavyaganta.
Okay, makes sense. And I won't question of Upadesa India and all this, or the other one, because that was by Muruganar himself, and that was anyway completed by one, so no question about it.
Yes, yes, yes.
But when you said about the hearsay and translated, it's the same case with Nanyar, because Nanyar was originally again
It was recorded by
memorized by
Yes. Nanya was originally question and answers, but firstly, Bhagavan wrote many of the answers, either on a slate or on slips of paper or on the sand. So Shiv Prashan Pillai was able to record more accurately. Moreover, Shiv Prashan Pillai was such a well-attuned disciple. The very first question he asked Bhagavan was, Swami, who am I? So that shows how well suited to Bhagavan he was. But he asked the first question he asked was the most appropriate question. So because of his spiritual maturity, he asked useful and deep questions and got useful and deep answers. And later, Bhagavan rewrote the question and answer version in the form of an essay. So the essay is actually written by Bhagavan.
Yeah, so Swamiji, but nobody recorded Bhagavan's voice. Yeah.
The story goes that somebody tried to record and the equipment didn't work.
Oh, is that so?
No, yeah,
Michael might confirm that.
No. Someone did bring some recording equipment, and they set it up.
Okay.
And Bhagavan was just sitting there keeping quiet, and people asked Bhagavan to say something. Bhagavan kept quiet. When they finally came up and took down all the equipment, because in those days it was much more elaborate equipment they needed for recording. Then someone said, "Oh, Bhagavan, they were so disappointed. They came here to record your voice." And Bhagavan said, "How to record my voice? My voice is silence." And then they said, "Oh, we should at least have recorded that." But by that time, it had all been switched off.
So Bhagavan let his photographs be taken, but not his voice. Like, what was the why was this? His photographs he allowed to be taken.
Yes. Did you say why?
Yes.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yes, sir, why?
Ask Bhagavan. Even Bhagavan won't be able to answer. No, I have got no will of my own. We can give any reason we like.
Sanjay, actually Bhagavan spoke much. Even though it looks like he spoke based on talks and day, but if you look at his whole lifetime, most of the time he was always silent whole day, and only he used to answer maybe few questions for a few minutes to some visitors, but not. I don't think so all visitors are lucky enough to be answered. So by the personality of Bhagavan was such that he was not really a
Bhagavan answered everyone, but sometimes the appropriate answer was silence. But not everyone was able to understand the silence. But the silence is the...
But he had a view that those people who understood his silence understand his lessons, right? That's how.
Yeah.
Isn't it so, Swamiji?
Silence is the teaching.
Silence
Actual
is the ultimate
teaching is silence.
Yes.
Bhagavan is silence. Bhagavan himself is silence.
Yes. Yes.